Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. A sensational Brazilian Grand Prix ends with Lando Norris with a hard-fought victory, arguably putting one hand on the World Championship trophy, but on the other hand, Max Verstappen keeps his championship dream still alive after a miraculous run from the pit lane. The same cannot be said for Oscar Piastri. Another torrid day off the podium, a penalty to boot as well, but a controversial one at that. People certainly have different opinions on whether that was deserved or not. Could have made for a very different Grand Prix in the grand scheme of things. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. All that good stuff. Not far off 85,000. Let's dive in. So Max, first of all, they blew up the car last night. They were like, this is terrible. Whatever we changed between the sprint and qualifying did not go to plan. Max was down in P16. They decided, okay, we're going to give him a brand new engine. We're going to give him brand new everything. And we're going to totally revamp the setup. Now, interestingly enough, I will say, Tsunoda was also on the same terrible setup. They could have also started Yuki from the pit lane. I guess their logic was, we need to put every single man and woman in this garage into work on Max's car. We can't afford any distractions. So unfortunately, Yuki was saddled with a donkey again today. But this was the boys late last night working on Max's car. You know, the rain was going to come down a little bit, we thought as well, at least overnight. They had the garage door down. They were working on major wholesale changes. And, well, Max definitely did them justice. He even spoke to Bortoletto and said that I made them change the whole car. So whatever Max's ideas were in terms of the direction they should take, they clearly went the right route today. His pace was very, very strong. And if for a late safety car, who knows if he could have even won this Grand Prix from the pit lane today. But the engine was also pretty spicy, right? Like we saw what happened with Hamilton with a brand new engine around here in 2021. Verstappen also had a brand new engine in the back of his Red Bull. It was obviously going to be pretty tasty, wasn't it? And it's going to be relevant. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Max, yeah, he is still quite a way behind in the championship, certainly after today to Lando. But we go to Las Vegas in a couple of weeks. That's a big power circuit. Same story in Qatar, really. So Verstappen's new engine is going to be a big advantage, I think, for him as the season goes on, but it might be a little bit too little, too late. They also did a few things with drainage after what happened yesterday at Turn 3 when Piastri, Colapinto, Hulkenberg all slid out. They basically drilled these holes in the curbs so the water would drain. They tried a similar thing at the first, basically on the start-finish straight as well, to help with the drainage. But things got underway. This was Max Verstappen starting for the pit lane. The first thing to note here, by the way, there were a ton of different strategies. Max was starting on the hard compounds. We had medium tyres. We had soft tyres. We had everything on display today. They get off the line, and once again, despite the fact that Antonelli's on the soft, Norris is on the medium, Norris with just a brilliant start, right? Like his execution, again, if you look at the recent competitive sessions, qualifying, sprint races, whatever, he's dominated pretty much everything now for the last couple of weekends. Today was not flawless, precisely. I think there will be some questions on the fact that Max was actually really close at the end of this Grand Prix. Look, maybe the engine had a significant part to play in that. But Turn 1 was kept relatively clean. Antonelli, Leclerc, Piastri, the Racing Bulls gave it a decent go. Russell had definitely a battle he had to fight to stay where he eventually did. Unfortunately, though, for Gabriel Bortoletto, he was on the wall. Bit of an incident with Stroll. Was it really Stroll's fault? I think Bortoletto got a little bit optimistic around the outside. I think he got optimistic yesterday, and obviously the crash was spectacular and glad that he was okay. They'd fixed the car, and then within half a lap he was in the wall. So, yeah, not a good day for the resident Brazilian drivers, including, of course, Lewis Hamilton. So the very first corner, Hamilton got into an incident with Sainz. Basically, they went three wide. Hamilton kind of did what Leclerc did at the restart and was out wide, but he got tagged by Sainz. To me, I think it was a racing incident, but Hamilton was then down in P18, and he knew that he needed to do something about it. He was coming up on Colapinto here, and he dives to the inside, and it looks like this is possibly going to be fine, but he just misjudges it a bit, really. It looks like Colapinto also kind of moves to the defensive a little bit, like he moves left right about here, but if you have a look at it, really, Colapinto's just following the line of the cars in front, so I think Hamilton Hamilton just misjudged it slightly, a bit optimistic, and, well, caused a collision, which didn't really affect Colapinto in the end, but it did absolutely destroy Hamilton's car. So his front wing was disintegrated, and the even worse thing was that it didn't just fly off, it got lodged under his car in the floor. So I mean, the day started horribly for Ferrari, and that continued, right? So Hamilton comes into the pits, he gets a new front wing, he's got loads of damage on it, and I thought even at this point, to be fair, I didn't think yet, but in the coming minutes, the best decision Ferrari made today was leaving Hamilton out, and we'll explain why in a second. But let's get to the restart, right? Because this was a big moment in the whole championship, let's be honest. We can even see Russell locking up in the background. Leclerc had a slight lockup as well. People are saying, oh, Leclerc went really wide to try and avoid any drama. I think that is true, but also I think he did have a little lockup himself that sent him out wide. So Norris goes for the safety car restart. He handles it fine. Piastri, though, gets a brilliant restart, and he's right on the inside of all of these three guys. And look, I think Piastri personally he absolutely should go for this. Now, of course, I think he did cause this collision. It is controversial, and we'll discuss why in a second, especially when we play it through a couple of different angles here. This was another angle as they were approaching the corner. You can see kind of where Piastri's car is with respect to Antonelli. I think this is why he was given the penalty, really, is because according to the racing guidelines, if you look at this single screenshot, that doesn't show the whole picture. But if you look at this single screenshot, it's clearly Piastri's fault on this evidence, because he's not alongside enough. He needs to be alongside the wing mirrors. His front tyres need to be alongside the wing mirrors on the entry to the corner to be entitled to space. That's not... We're at the entry of the corner here, I would argue. He's not alongside, and he's also out of control of the car. Now, you might argue that the reason he's going in hot here and is locked up the brakes at this point is because, you know, he's trying to avoid the contact. Because he knows that Antonelli's squeezing him. But, you know, you can see at this moment that on this particular screenshot, I think it is kind of clear, but I think there was a little bit more to it than that, right? It is actually kind of complicated, because this is then Piastri's view a couple of seconds later when Antonelli does just squeeze him out of the corner. But again, the stewards will look at it and say, well, you weren't fully alongside at the entry to the corner. A couple of seconds ago, you'd argue that he might well have been. I mean, you can see here on the entry here, it looks like he kind of is, but you know, how do you define the corner entry, right? So, you know, exactly where is Piastri entitled to the space? Because if you look at it right here, it looks like he's kind of done enough. Like, it looks like Piastri might have done enough here to be entitled to racing room on the inside. But when we fast forward to this point, you know, I don't, it's very marginal. I don't think he is. And then in addition to the fact that he then locks up, I think you can see the little lockup from Leclerc as well in the, you know, small little lockup on the left-hand side here. That sends him a little bit out wide, but also Leclerc is very much trying to avoid any of this drama on the inside. But then Piastri locks up, loses control of the car really at this point, and I think that he is trying to make it so that he can make the inside. But again, if you look at this screenshot, at this point, Antonelli hasn't committed to fully turning into the corner yet. Piastri is out of control of his car, and he's not in a position to be entitled to a racing room. So Antonelli then cuts across, gets hit. Look, I think what's interesting about this is, if Leclerc wasn't here, let's say Leclerc wasn't here at all, I know that many people would say, well, it's kind of on Antonelli for, you know, should have given more room, right? And Antonelli did have some more space to the right of him that he could have elected to use if he wanted to, but he didn't have to, I don't think, based on the racing guidelines. Again, Piastri was punished not harshly, he was probably punished fairly based on the rules and everything, but I think there are some level of consequences here. The fact that this incident resulted in then Leclerc getting hit and he was out of the race, that is, you know, a penalty was going to be given to someone, because that's how it works. If there's a collision that ends somebody's race, you know, there is going to be a penalty in play. Some were arguing that Antonelli should have been penalised as well, because he also had a part to play. But, you know, Leclerc, unfortunately, was collateral damage here. And I think the stewards probably got this one right. Actually, you know, before I recorded this video, I actually wasn't so sure on my opinion, but having watched it back, I think they made the right call. There was some discussion on whether, because, you know, this was the entry to the corner, right? And again, you can see Piastri's not quite far enough alongside to be entitled to room. Look, I think Piastri should have done this. I think that he actually made the right decision going for it. I think he had to, right? Like, you know, he knew that he needed to try something today to gain some leverage back in the championship fight. He had a golden opportunity to try and go down the inside. You know, I think he did the right thing to go for it, you know, but he's got to recognize that if you go for a move like that, you're going to take some level of risk and punishment. Alex Brundle says that he doesn't think that it was. He was alongside in the braking zone. As I say, I don't quite see it like that. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Terrible luck for Charles Leclerc, like so unfortunate, right? Because he was actually having a pretty good time of things. He'd done everything right. He'd given the guys on the inside all the room in the world. And then Piastri tags Antonelli, who tags Leclerc. And he's the one who goes out of the Grand Prix with you know, massive front suspension damage. So hugely unfortunate at this point for Leclerc. Hamilton then had so much damage, and he was on the hard tyre at this point, which was not a good tyre to be on. So he had no grip at all. Like, his car was all over the place, and Hamilton was like, this is really dangerous. I might actually just crash at this point. But Piastri was, you know, he actually gave it a good go on Norris. Then there was a virtual safety car we'll get to here in a second. That was actually a couple of laps before, but yeah, so Tsunoda got noted for a collision with Stroll. He then got a 10-second penalty for that. Piastri then got his 10-second penalty, which did change the dynamics in terms of the strategy that they had to deploy, but it was pretty clear. Lap 22, Norris just had bucket loads more pace than Oscar did. He was just pulling out a substantial gap. Then it was the Mercedes. But all the talk then shifted to Max Verstappen. So the early stint of the race was very interesting for Max. He started on the hards, he made a bit of progress, then there was all the crashes and the drama, so then Max was in a good position, he was 13th. Then though, he got a slow puncture, probably because of all the, you know, material, the debris on the track and everything. So then Max had to pit again, this time for the mediums, because it looked like after the virtual safety car, Max is in a great spot. He's already up to 13th, there's already been a safety car, right? The field is compressed. If Max had have stayed out then, if Max hadn't got the puncture, you know, at the time it looked like the puncture was actually going to be really bad for him. In hindsight, it might have been kind of good, just because the hard tyre was probably so bad that being off it was probably worth sacrificing a few positions at this point. So Max had to sacrifice quite a lot. I mean, he's 16th here, 5 seconds behind Hamilton on lap 10. So for him to go from there to where he ended up was truly remarkable today. And, you know, there were some good candidates for driver of the day. Max obviously was always going to be one of them. So Max is already making serious progress here. He makes a load of overtakes on the mediums. A lot of the other guys realize the hard isn't working. The soft needs to pit early. The soft was pretty fragile today. The medium really was the race tyre, as we saw. But Verstappen on lap 27 was already in 4th, only 19 seconds off the lead at this time. So a safety car would have changed the game entirely, especially once the front runners needed to pit. So we get to lap 30. This is when Lando comes into the box. You know, he gets the preference, right? There's no papaya rules or orders or anything like that. Just to quickly mention what I talked about with Ferrari, because a disaster for them in the championship as well. I think they're probably 4th now in the championship behind both Red Bull and Mercedes by quite some margin. But Hamilton was under investigation from the collision with Colapinto. The smartest thing Ferrari did was to leave him out. It was obvious Hamilton was never scoring points, but just in case he got a penalty for that, so that they could then box him, serve the penalty, send him out again, then retire him. That was worth doing, so he didn't get a penalty for the next round, turn into a grid drop, right? So Ferrari at least did one good thing today, but it wasn't much. Then Norris pitted for soft tyres. So this was interesting, because lap 30, the hard tyres would have probably gone to the end, but clearly weren't very good. So Lando pitted for the softs. He then came out behind Max, which was quite something really, given where he started. But actually, the soft tyres of the first few laps were mighty, and Lando had absolutely no issues at all clearing Max. It looked like, you know, Grand Prix totally over. There's no way back from here. Tsunoda then gets a 10-second penalty. Then he gets another 10-second penalty because they touched his car too soon. Glad for Piastri's sake that that didn't happen for him. Lap 34, though, Piastri is now in a difficult position because his pace wasn't that good compared to Lando's, really. So he had to make a big decision. Is he going to go for the hards? Is he going to go soft? The thing is, when you've got loads of pace, any strategy works within reason. But with Piastri, he was a good 2.5, 3 tenths probably off Lando's pace today a lot of the time. It's what it's been for the last few rounds, let's be honest. And that put him in a tricky spot because they put him for the softs. He then comes out in 7th place here. I think maybe he was 8th actually, behind Liam Lawson in the end. He has to get a little bit of work done. And then everyone's pitted once, really, right? So Hamilton then retires at about this point in the race. Norris, Antonelli, Russell, Behrman, who again, I mean, look, it's difficult to sing the praises today highly enough of that Prema Formula 2 duo from last season, Antonelli and Behrman. But yeah, what drivers they are turning into right now, and phenomenal rookie seasons they're really starting to have, I think. So Norris was 22 laps on the softs. We're on lap 50. Things were getting real interesting at this point in the race. For the leads, like genuinely for the victory in the Grand Prix, because Piastri was 3rd, both Mercedes had gone for a second stop, they were going to the ends. The question was, did you need to go for a second stop? I thought Max, after pitting off the hards early, was in a great spot to go medium to the end of the Grand Prix. I thought that's what they were going to do. I thought maybe they could have actually done it. And I think this is, in hindsight, one of the big questions today about Red Bull's strategy, because we know track position is key. This season especially, Lando was 22 laps into his soft tyres, and he wasn't quick. Like, he really wasn't quick. He was losing a lot of time to a lot of other drivers at this point. And I thought the reason for that is, okay, he's probably just going to try and go to the ends, admit that the Pirellis are just like terrible tyres, right? They're way harder than they need to be, and he's just preserving the compound to get to the end of the Grand Prix. But no, that was genuinely Lando's pace, and it actually put him in a pretty tricky position for a time. So he comes into the box here. Good stops from McLaren, by the way, today, generally anyway, which has been a big problem for them lately. He comes in for a set of mediums, 20 laps to go, but notably enough, these mediums were the same mediums that he started the sprint race on yesterday. He then swapped to the soft tyres. So these mediums had already done 9 very solid racing laps. So these were not brand new, fresh, straight out of the box medium tyres for Lando. Max Verstappen then goes from the pit lane to leading the Grand Prix. And look, if there was a safety car, if there was something else happening now, Max could have won today. Like, he genuinely could have won today. But then we saw the very interesting decision. So Piastri had to box again. There really was no other way for him to manage the situation. So he had to go down to P6 and try and fight his way through. Lawson was on a 1-stop, which actually eventually worked very well. Again, we saw some mega DRS trains at the end of this Grand Prix because track position is mighty, and maybe Red Bull could have taken advantage of that, right? So Lando at this point was 8 seconds behind, about 19 laps to go. Look, he's probably going to overtake Max and win the Grand Prix. That's probably still true. Max probably could have given him a fight for it. And does Max get seconds if he doesn't box again? It's just interesting because Verstappen at this point had done maybe 9 laps or so more laps than Norris had, because Norris's tyres were 9 laps old. So Verstappen's tyres were brand new when he did his second stint, so they were at this point like 18, 19 laps old. So it wasn't like an amazing difference in tyre life. It was relevant for sure. Norris probably gets the job done. But it was not a guarantee at this point. I genuinely thought Max might stay out. But Red Bull felt that it was worth going for the soft tyres. We know the softs are relatively fragile, so he was rapid in the first few laps, but that was going to run out. So I think at this point, Red Bull, they gave up the win, right? They gave up the win to Lando, which, you know, it's an interesting decision, I think, in hindsight, especially because Max arguably needed to win every race. So they could have kept him out and just hoped that he could keep Norris at bay. And unlikely, but not totally impossible. Then Verstappen had a lot of work to do, and he did a lot of work, to be fair to him, right? You know, he was told the tyres are pretty vulnerable, but he was catching Russell hand over fist. He then gets a brilliant move done on Russell around the outside, but then by the time he catches up to Antonelli, his tyres aren't quite in the same spot. And Antonelli also deserves huge credit for the drive today. I think I said when the season began, I was expecting there would be a handful of weekends where Antonelli would surprise people and just straight up be quicker than Russell. I think Russell's been excellent this year. We've not seen much of that from Antonelli. There's been a couple of weekends where Antonelli's been very impressive, others where he's been kind of nowhere with respect to expectations. But this weekend, he was just straight up better than George Russell in every single regard. A driver who is arguably the driver of the season alongside Max, right? So, it's incredible the job that Kimi did today. Okay, Max's tyres weren't quite as they were, but the defensive job he did, okay, he nearly made a little mistake on the final lap, which gave Max a chance. But in the end, he held on spectacularly well. Lando Norris wins the Grand Prix, collects a huge 25 points, and really just hasn't put a foot wrong. Yes, his pace today, certainly on the soft tyre, was at times somewhat questionable, and Piastri did have a big penalty. But even then, Piastri, even with the penalty considered, was pretty much nowhere near where Lando ended up being. So Antonelli second, Verstappen third, Russell comes home in fourth. And I think this is also critical, that Piastri wasn't able to overtake Russell, right? Because he gave it a decent go, but he wasn't able to make the overtake happen. Again, the dirty air was causing problems. Behrman holds on for sixth. To be fair, it wasn't really holding on. He just drove a stellar race in no man's land. Then Lawson held on from Hadjar, from Hulkenberg, from Gasly. So congrats to Gasly getting a point. I'm actually really happy for him, given the torrid time that Alpine have had lately. So definitely interesting reaction to things as well. I think Lando has got a pretty good mentality about this. He wasn't like, oh yeah, the championship's looking good and all this. He just said, look, the pace today was good. He's happy with it, but he expected to be faster. He was surprised and somewhat concerned that Max ended up so close as he was. That's the attitude that makes you be a world champion, just focusing on every small detail that you can get quicker from. This was Leclerc's opinion. Because, as I said, I think it was Piastri's fault, but again, I do see why it's controversial. Leclerc says Kimi sees that there's Piastri, doesn't give him any room at all. Is it optimistic on Oscar's part? Maybe, but could it have been avoided by Kimi? I think so. It's ultra frustrating. I can't do anything. The thing is, if Kimi did run wider, then, 3 would have had to go into 2 on the next corner, and it would have been, even then, maybe they could have found a way to keep it clean, but, imagine where Leclerc would have been. Like, if Kimi ran wider, there's 2 guys on his inside going into turn 2, it was going to get messy at one point or another. It eventually got messy there. Piastri, before we just discuss this quote, I think Piastri says the right thing about this and says, look, no regrets on the decision that he made. I had an opportunity. I went for it. The other 2 on the outside braked quite late. There was obviously a bit of a lock-up into the corner. That's because I could see Kimi was not going to give me any space, which is, I don't know. Do you believe this? I can see the logic, but as we've said, when you look at Piastri's onboard from earlier on, it's not clear whether Kimi's going to give him space or not. Kimi's definitely tightening, but it's not... I don't know if he knows. I think he locked up because he just, got a bit too eager going into the corner and took too much of a risk, right? I can't disappear. The decision is what it is. Just got to get the most out of it that I can. The pace wasn't where I wanted to be. So I think that was really Piastri's frustration, right? Was, okay, the penalty wasn't ideal, but if you're on fire, as he was earlier in the season, the penalty is no big deal. Brush it off and win anywhere, or at least come seconds, such as in Silverstone, for example. That's not how it transpired. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Long video today, but a lot to cover and lots of content, I'm sure, to go through in the next 2 weeks before we go to Las Vegas. And the title will get a step closer to its conclusion. Lando leads the championship by 24 points over Oscar Piastri. Now, Max Verstappen is 49 points back on Lando. Russell is officially out of contention. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.